In this exercise, we're going to use Keylight to perform a basic color key operation on a piece of green screen footage and to perform a very basic composite with a piece of background footage, in this case just a JPEG. If we just take a look at the footage, I'll just select the source image first. We can see this is a piece of green screen footage. It's a short image sequence, and if I select the background and hit 2 to view this in the viewers number 2 channel, you can see that this is kind of just a kind of an old sort of industrial office kind of environment. So this is essentially what we're going to use as the basis for this basic key an A over B composite. So to start, we need to add Keylight. We will use Keylight for this. So I'll just hit Tab and start to type until Keylight appears, and put it in, and you can see here that this is this has actually got 4 ports. There's a source port that always goes to our foreground, so we'll connect that now. We have a background which always goes to our background, and then we have a couple of ports for masks, which we will come back to. We'll use at least one of them later on. And then we connect Keylight up to our viewer. Hit number 1 so that we're actually looking at it, and you can see that what we're seeing now is the green screen footage, and that's essentially because Keylight is configured to perform an A over B, but at the moment we haven't done any selection to remove any of the green from the environment, and we also haven't set the Keylight to actually perform a composite. So this is what we're going to start by doing. So in the first instance, then we will focus on on the actual selection of the green color, and this is absolutely pivotal. Keylight has about 120 different properties, and every single one of these properties are concerned with refining the matte in terms of thresholds and tolerances, but they all take their initial sort of baseline from this selection. So suffice to say that this selection is absolutely critical, and you may think, well, we can click anywhere and we'll get a green, and you know, it may well be arbitrary, but it'll be adequate. That's far from the truth. You know, there's a lot of range, even in a very sort of clear and well lit green screen like we're looking at in this particular sequence. There's lots of variances when we consider things like grain and things. There's lots of variances in this green, and we could pick a colour which is far from the best to actually perform our best possible key. So we need to make sure that this selection is as good as it possibly can be, and we're going to look at a couple of little tricks and a couple of views that are going to help us to do that. So in the first instance, we will click on the swatch. That makes the screen colour selection active, and we can now come onto anywhere around the green screen, come up here for example, and just control click. Okay, and you can see there that we've made a basic screen color selection. If I just hit the A to look at the alpha channel, you can see that we've made a selection. We're starting to see the basis of a matte. Obviously there's a lot of problems, particularly around this area and also around the sort of the border between the face and the hair. A lot of problems with this matte. I think that we can make a much better green screen selection than we've made there. And we're going to use a view and a couple of keyboard tricks to help us. The first instance, we're going to switch over to screen matte view. This is a bit like, I'll go back to my RGB channel so we can see this. Screen matte is it's a bit like looking at the image in the alpha channel, and we can see the sort of the separation between the transparent area, which records as pure black, and the opaque area, which records as pure white. And that's certainly our objective, to get the girl in a state of almost complete opacity, everything around her in a state of complete transparency, except for an edge around the edge of the matte line where we should expect to see a sort of a thin area of semi-transparency. And we should certainly expect to see some semi-transparency around this fine hair detail, where the light from the background is actually passing through the hair. Okay, so let's look at how we can actually improve this green screen selection. If we hold down Control and Alt and then start to pull around, you can see that we get a dynamic change of the matte. And what we're looking to achieve here, just by making this selection, is we're looking to get the best possible area of black in the background and the best possible area of transparency. Once we've achieved that, we can just release the mouse button, and you can see there that we've got a much better selection. I'm just going to hit O to turn my overlays on. You can see that there's a little red dot, and that is basically telling us the precise pixel. If we come into here, you can see the variance in the green screen. There's a lot of, there's a lot of grain, even though we can't really see it until we get right in. there's a lot of variance in the green screen. That is the exact pixel that's been selected. This pixel RGB value that's stated up here in the Keylight properties is the color value of that precise pixel. So you can see how an arbitrary selection would have got us a completely different result. Okay, so maybe that's okay. Maybe we could do something with that, but let's see if we can get it a little bit better still. What we're going to do is we're going to change over to a different view called Status. We'll just take a look at this. It's a completely different animal. Essentially, status, it shows us a few different things which we'll have a little look at shortly. But one of the things that it does show us is it kind of shows us an exaggerated view of the screen map. So we can see that where we thought that was actually quite a good mat, there's actually very little absolutely transparent pixels in the areas that we need to be fully transparent, and there's a lot of semi-transparent areas within our subject, which will translate to holes which will therefore show the background through. So these are things that we can't accept when we're performing a colour key. So let's look and see if we can actually refine this selection a little bit further in Status. And we can do that by using another keyboard shortcut, which involves holding down the Shift, the Alt and the Control key, and we can draw out and draw a marquee out. Now we know that this red area that we selected, we know that's a pretty good area. So what we can do maybe is just start to drag out from there and see if we can get a better result on the background and on the foreground. Okay, let's try a different area. We know it's pretty good in this area. I'll just come across it and see what... No, that's not particularly good. And what essentially is happening here is that Keylight is basically sort of selecting and analysing all the pixel values within the red marquee that you can see, and then it's averaging them together. And it's a good way sometimes of actually getting the mat to its best possible state. Okay, sometimes it works better than others. In this case it's not giving me a great result, so we'll just leave it at that. But already you can see that we've got a slightly better area of transparent areas and slightly better opacity in the centre. So we'll click our picker again to disable that, which means that that colour is now locked in. We can obviously go back and unlock it and choose again, but it just by locking it in like that just means that we can't click now and make an arbitrary selection and undo all the work that we've done. We could have spent 15-20 minutes doing this selection, and I probably would have had I been doing this for a commercial project. But I wouldn't want to undo that work by accidentally making an arbitrary selection because I forgot to disable that. So there we go. It's now disabled, and we can't accidentally overwrite that green screen colour. So what we want to do now is we want to look at the use of the gain. And if I just scrub the gain up into positive values, you can see that that has quite a dramatic effect. And what it essentially does is it takes this initial green value here, and it basically allows a greater threshold of colours similar to it to actually be used to perform the alpha. But obviously you can see there that as I go in, the further I go in, the more of this edge detail, the quality of the mat is determined to a large extent by the edge detail, and you can see that the more I go in, the more I start to eat into that edge detail, which can result in a very sort of choppy, clunky kind of mat, and a very sort of a very crude sort of separation between the transparent and opaque areas. So the trick with gain is to use it very sparingly. You can see there that I've increased it by 0.4. That's all, and that's as far as I would ever want to increase the gain. Any more than that, and I'm going to start to eat into some of this important fine hair detail. And there are actually better tools for refining these transparent and opaque areas anyway, which we'll come to now. So let's take a look inside the screen mat, and you can see that the screen mat opens up an all new set of a subset of trimming properties, and the two that we're particularly interested in here is the clip black and the clip white. The clip black is an additive process, which means that you actually increase the number, and as you increase the number, it actually starts to clean up the areas that we've designated as transparent. And you can see there that fairly quickly, with a value of 0.06, I've got rid of all the transparent areas, semi-transparent areas, in the areas that I need to be fully transparent. So the clip white is a subtractive process whereby we lower the value, and as we lower the value, we start to firm up the opacity in the mat area. So again, I'm just bringing that down until I've got rid of all the holes that are in the mat. Okay, and you see I've come down to about 0.86 on that one. Another thing that I can do, if I just come into this this area here, is I can actually use screen softness, and I can just use that just to blur the alpha a little bit. You've got to be very careful. In fact, if I go to screen map view, we'll probably see this a little bit better. You can see there that what this essentially does is it just blurs the alpha and just allows a little bit more semi-transparency to come through that blurring process. So again, you can go too far and it becomes, you know, and you just completely blow out the matte. So again, it's very subtle. You know, very, very subtle in the way that you want to be applying that. Okay, so let's say that we are happy to accept the matte as it is at the moment. Obviously, we've got this good separation between the transparent and the opaque areas. Now, what about this area here? If we remember, if we come back to our source, we can see there that there was different tonality in the green screen. That typically happens through the fall off of the lights, or a transference from a back wall to a side wall, or various other things can result in that change of colour. So this is why we always want to be picking colours as close to our subject as possible, because this is the area where we're likely to have fewer shadows, and we're likely to have less fall off of the lights. So this is where we'll be looking to make our colour selection, and we can actually get rid of this through in other means. And the approach that we're going to use is to actually use a garbage matte. And to do that, we're going to actually be capitalizing on some of these ports that are within the Keylight tool. So, to use a garbage matte, you can use garbage mattes in a number of ways. You can actually use keys or various other things to do that. I'm actually going to use a fairly straightforward approach, which is to use a mask. So to do that, I'm going to bring up a roto node. So I've just clicked into an empty space in the node graph, and just hit the tab button and started to type. And you can see there's the roto node. Here it is. At the moment, I've not connected it up to anything. And what I want to do with this now is I just want to take some of the drawing tools, in this case the Bezier tool, and I'm just going to sort of click and just move around the subject and then close it. Now, obviously nothing's happened. But you can see there that that's enclosed the subject. Now, what I would always do at this point is I would just pull through the sequence, just check at all the frames, just to make sure that she doesn't actually go out of that boundary at any point during the clip. Obviously, if she was moving around a lot, then I would have to animate that mask. But in this case, she's within the boundary, and we know that we're kind of fairly safe within that extreme. So, at the moment, nothing's happening. Well, let's try connecting the output mask port to the roto node. Still nothing's happening. And the reason why nothing's happening is that at the moment the mask hasn't been told what to do. At the moment it's still outputting red, green, blue and alpha data. And we need to make sure that Keylight only uses the alpha data. So if we click on Keylight and we come down to the crops, we can see here that we've got an internal matte component, which we would configure from that port if we were using a mask, for example, to highlight a particular area within the boundaries of the subject. Say, for example, she'd got a brooch on that was catching a lot of spill from the lights, and therefore there was a lot of green within the boundaries of the girl, and that was causing us to have a hole a transparent hole in her. What we could do is we could actually create a mask and use it as an inside mask, which is sometimes called a holdout mask, and that would allow us to isolate that. In this particular case, we're dealing with the outsides. So if we take a look at the outside matte component, if we just change this now to alpha, we'll just go back to the... Oh, I'm still looking at the wrong view, so let's go back into there. If we just take a look at this in its final result, and you can see that we've actually lost everything. And that's because we've actually got this the wrong way around. We've drawn the mask in the area over our subject, and we've now told Keylight to actually use the transparency from that to create an alpha over that. And at the moment, that's covering our entire subject. In fact, the only bit that's actually visible in this is the area that we want to get rid of, which is these sort of areas on the outside. So what we need to do is we need to invert that, change that to inverted alpha, and now our subject is back. And if we go back to status, we can see now that this is showing us red, which means that that is actually included in the mask. If we go back to the composite view now and take a look at this, you can see that we don't have any of these grotty sort of semi-transparent areas. If I set that back to none, you can see that we actually see those grey areas from the green screen actually in the composite. So by setting that to inverted matte, it means that that area is completely transparent now. This area that we use to perform the key is also fully transparent, but our subject is fully opaque. Okay, so the composite view essentially performs the basic A over B merge of the background and foreground layer, and this is a good tool for actually just cross-referencing our subject with the background that is intended. If we just take a look at this, we can see that excuse me, you can see that there's still quite a bit of green within the hair detail, and that is obviously problematic. Also, if we just zoom out a little bit, we can see that there's a very sort of strong discrepancy both in tonality and colour between the background and the foreground. But what I'll do is I'll wrap up now, and I will put together a follow-on tutorial which actually goes into how we can actually look at getting rid of this spill, how we can maybe add something like a light wrap so that we can actually bring some light and colour detail from the actual background and combine it with the semi-transparent areas around the edge of our matte. And then we'll look at how we can use colour correction nodes to tone match and colour match the foreground and background layers. So we'll wrap up at that point, and I hope you found that useful.